Welcome, everyone, to Productside's latest live online webinar. Ship happens, adoption is earned, why discovery decides product outcomes. We'll give folks a few moments to join, but while we do, I would invite you to share in the chat where you are joining us from geographically. Santa Cruz Mountains, can't type this morning. Where else are other folks hailing from? All right, Dean, while the crowd is gathering, let's go ahead and advance.
Okay.
Stephen from Toronto, welcome.
Yep.
Stephen. Awesome. So my name is Roger Snyder. I'm a principal consultant and trainer from Productside, and as I put in the chat, I am live in the mountains near Santa Cruz and central coast of California. Welcome, Nadia from Jordan. That's fantastic.
Yeah, the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan. Been there.
Yeah,
Beautiful country.
excellent. India, Sadie from India. Awesome. Dean, why don't you introduce yourself?
Yes, I'm Dean Peters, also a principal consultant and trainer here at Productside. I think I've been with the organization about 3.5 years. Before that, about 20 years of product management in various domains and various technologies. And even before that, as I like to tell people, was a recovering software engineer for about 12 to 15 years, depending on how you count it.
Excellent. Yes, I too was once upon a time a software engineer. Excellent. All right. Well, we've got a couple of opening slides that I will go over, the administrivia slides, and then I'll turn it over to Dean. Today, if you're not familiar with Productside, we have been in the business of product management for over 25 years. And that's what we do. We focus strictly on helping out the discipline of product management, product marketing, product ownership, and we focus in particular on helping you become more effective in building awesome products that people want and to buy and use. We focus on enterprises, helping them transform their practices, their culture, their skills. And we also are proud of the fact that we always tailor our content to your particular context. What's going on in your particular industry, your market, where you are in your own journey in terms of product management maturity. And as Dean pointed out, he's been in this business over 20 years. I have been in this business over 25 years, and we're all invested in your success. So check us out at productside.com if you want to learn more. Let's keep going. All right, we want to make this interactive. We do not want it to be death by PowerPoint. So Dean and I want to hear from you. So please open up that Q&A box, as you can see highlighted at the bottom of your Zoom screen, and pop questions in here. We'll either take them during the webinar or we'll still reserve some time at the end of the webinar to take questions as well. But we want to hear from you. We want to make sure we're helping with the information that we're sharing and answering any questions that may come up. Now, the number one question that we receive is, hey, can I watch this later? And you absolutely can. So we will send you, when you registered, you entered your email address. We will send a follow-up email that includes a link to the complete recording of this webinar, along with probably some handy resources that will help you in your product management career. So that's our number one question. Got that one tackled, I hope. Let's keep going. We also encourage you to join our product management community on LinkedIn. Check out the Productside community where you can learn from others about what they're concerned about, what's going on in the product management field, and you can share leadership best practices, learn from others that have had lots of experience in this. And it's just a great opportunity to network with your peers. So use the QR code there or the link that Kimberly has just popped in there in the chat to join us on LinkedIn and be part of a over 40,000 person product management community. All right, with that, we've got the administrivia out of the way. Dean, I turn it over to you.
All right, and one more small act of administrivia. If you'll look in the chat,
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
giving you a short link to a mural board so you can follow along. Now, if you click
Mhm.
on that link, you're going to get a login screen like this. Well, you don't have to log in if you don't want to. And as a matter of fact, you can just say enter as a visitor if you want. And you just click on that. You put in your name like Dino, Bino. You hit event as a visitor, and then you're in. And you're like, where do I go? How do I do this? You see this little menu up on the upper right hand side. You click on that, and now you can follow along. So I'm on the agenda slide. I'd go to menu item number 6. I'd click on that, and I can zoom in on this. And this is going to become useful as we wind up having to get into some templates we're going to use. And I wanted to give you the ability not just to follow along, but zoom in.
Mhm.
So if you want, go ahead and use that mural link. Follow along with us here. We'll be going through the slides until I need to share some of the, what do you call it, some of the actual templates, and then we'll be zooming in on that. Now, while you're doing that, to the agenda. So we've
Mhm.
already done the intro. We're glad you're here. Um, Now, the first part is we're going to talk about defining what the problem is because we are in product management. Well, then we're going to
Mhm.
talk about how we want to organize around the problem. And then we're going to talk about how we're going to execute in making things happen. And then finally, we're going to have a recap and a Q&A plus some special offers you can't refuse. So first of all, let's define what the problem is. What problem are we solving and for whom today? Which is the mantra around here. And to do that, I want Roger to tell us a story of a very, 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 very bad delivery day. Because part of this, the title is Ship Happens, but Adoption is Earned. And
Right.
somewhere in the middle of that is delivery. And it was funny, Roger, you and I are talking about this Tuesday, I think, when we were walking through the deck, saying, like, Roger, I think the hard part is you keeping this to 1 or 3 stories. Because I would imagine if you got me, if you got yourself, myself, Kenny, and what do you call it, Tom, and maybe
Right.
Ryan in the room, we could probably do 2 hours of just, exchanging scars and telling war stories. But go ahead and give me a story that you feel helps shape, give us an idea of what the problem we're trying to solve and who we're trying to solve it for.
Right. Yes. And it very much is in line with this particular issue of shipping can happen, but adoption may or may not. And unfortunately, this story was a story of 2 years of my life. And it was as a result of an acquisition. I went to work for Microsoft after the company I worked for was acquired, and we worked on a super secret project for 2 years. And I must admit, we're going to talk about how important discovery is in this webinar. And we kicked off really well. We had an amazing 800 plus respondent survey and interviews with the right target market of possible users of our product. Got literally, it was $1 million study, got a lot of great results. Unfortunately, it was a time of dynamic change in the marketplace. So even though we kicked off with great discovery, we didn't stay current. We didn't keep experimenting. We didn't keep trying small amounts of value to see whether or not it was actually going to land with folks. And so we built a product for 2 years and launched it. And unfortunately, it fell on its face. I even have the tube from one of those products. There it is. Kin. Yes, you could look it up. Please don't. But anyway, it was 2 years of my life and somewhere between 500 million and $1 billion mistake because the product launched and 7 weeks later we discontinued it.
Wow.
So yeah.
There you go. And
Mhm.
I'm sorry you have still taking therapy for that, but the whole point is we all have stories like that, and you're not
Mhm.
alone. In fact, I've got here what I call the Hall of Shame. All right, it's 3 companies that wound up going down a similar path. So you've got the Anki Group here. So they created this perfect little robot for customers that didn't
Mhm.
exist. And I think they burnt through about $200 million in the process. Then you had Jibo, all right? They shipped enthusiasm instead of evidence. In fact, I was reading like one of these online post-mortems. And it said, their product was hope disguised as product roadmaps,
Mm.
which I think we've all been guilty of that
Yeah.
before.
Yeah, for
And
sure.
then finally, Watson on ecology. They guessed wrong, and a lot of it had to do with who they did discovery with first. Their sample set of customers was, I mean, very narrow, like a handful of physicians at a very specialized hospital in the Upper East Side of New York City, which
Oh, wow.
means what happened was nationwide and worldwide, other physicians weren't adopting it. So not only did they guess wrong, but they doubled down, launched anyway, and doubled down. I hate to say doubled down on the ignorance, but at least doubled down on not capturing the right analytics to see the fact that they had launched
Mm.
something that nobody really wanted outside of a handful of physicians on the Upper East Side of New York City.
Right. Oh my goodness.
And the bottom line is they thought they'd cheat death by cheating discovery. And that happens. I mean, think about how many
Mhm.
times, Roger, how many shops have you and I walked in saying, well, we'd like to do discovery, but,
Right. We
you
don't
know,
have time.
and we show this graphic in our lessons a little bit, a little bit differently. But it's like, no, no, you really want to make, in fact, let me turn my pen on here. You really want to, make your mistakes here and
Hmm.
experiment where it's really cheap as opposed to right around here where a lot of our examples were.
Right.
So just something, and I love this quote from Jeff Patton. The most expensive way to test your idea is to build production quality software.
Right.
So again, I think it's one of those types of things. It's like it's a pay me now or pay me later. So we want to resist that idea of,
Yes.
hey, we don't have time for this because we've seen this happen too often here. All right, let me close
Yeah,
that
we've
down a
lived through
second.
it, right? If you don't have time
Oh
for
yeah,
discovery, you will
yeah.
have time for failure later.
Yep. Oh, you kept my lines there. Give me a second here.
That's all.
So I got to clean my lines up here. Let me clean that up. Oh, okay. Yeah. Trash. Clear. Yeah. Clear all my drawings. Okay.
There you go.
So again, what we have here is you think about it. We spend so much time here in create and deliver, and I think we are just talking about that. We spend too much time where we're creating, we're delivering, and we really try to cheat on investigate and define.
Hmm.
You think about it. How many times have they said, "Look, just build the product." I know we know what we're doing, and just try and push something out the door. There's no discovery of what the market is. There's no discovery of how this product is going to create value for both the customer as well as the business. There's that investigate part of trying to understand what problem we're trying to solve and for whom, for the customer. I talked about the Anki. We built that they built a perfect robot that didn't have a customer base. I think you ran into a little bit of that scenario with Kim, where you came
Hmm.
out with a product wonderfully built, poorly adopted.
Well,
Um,
the customers were real. We knew
yeah.
them, but we missed the evolving needs that those customers had
Okay.
over the 2 years. And suddenly
And
we shipped without key features that they just couldn't, they wouldn't adopt for lack of those features.
well, okay, yeah, and we've heard some of those scenarios as well, where we've walked into places where they've had a product in market for a couple of years,
Hmm.
and what got them to success is not what's going to get them to future success. Where they
Right.
just they stop doing discovery. Look, it's out the door. So and so again, we want to sit there and we're and stop spending so much time here.
Right.
All right, let's get to the next slide. Come on, this thing has just been missed. There we go. So with that blueprint in mind, let's get to our first poll. In
Hmm.
which of these the product blueprint phases do you spend the most time? Is it in context? Is it in discovery, investigate, discovery, define, create, and deliver? Where are you spending most of your time as a product manager?
All right, we're getting some answers coming through. This is good.
Yep. Where are we spending most of the time?
Yeah, okay. This is kind of going with my hypothesis of where folks would say.
Yep. All righty. Give about another few seconds here.
Hmm.
See if things are simmering down. All righty.
I think so.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and end the poll. Your last chance to get in a vote. All right, we're ending the poll, and now we're going to share the results.
Hmm.
And it looks like we have a lot of people who are actually in Define, and that's awesome. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of investigate in front of that.
Right.
So I wonder what happens in Define if we're not doing context to investigate. And a lot of us are spending time in Create. Well, I sort of like that. That this is, that Create wasn't where we spent all our time, and we get different results from different people when we ask this.
Right.
But excellent results there. And we get that off the screen. We don't need to see that. So part of the message we want to get across to you today, in both with the stories that we've had, as well as some of the issues that we run into, is that you need to understand as a product manager, a product launch is a campaign, not a calendar event. All too often, we celebrate the launch date. Pop a few corks, eat some pizza, celebrate here. And then everyone walks away big, fat, dumb, and happy. And a few months later, there's maybe a meeting with the chief financial officer saying, "We're spending all this money to put this product out there. We're not seeing the return on investment." And then when we talk to customers, it's like, "Well, we like your product, but we don't like it so much that we're willing to spend money on it." And a lot of that has to do with the fact that as a product manager, it wasn't the launch that we botched. It is the planning and the
Right.
preparation and the definition. In other words, it's almost like in professional sports. It's the amount of practice you
Hmm.
do off the field before the game, the amount of video that you watch, the amount of techniques, the amount of coaching that you do prior to the game that's really going to determine the outcome of the game. And we see that all across that. We see that in musical fields as well. It's not that the performance fails, not because something that happened bad during the performance. It's because what we did ahead of time and then
Right.
immediately after doing the understanding the impact and improving. So we really don't spend a lot of time on developing the plan, the checkpoints, driving awareness and getting that awareness. And then even after the launch, we don't sit there and drive awareness or really get into adoption. So this is sort of the problem area we want to sort of get into today and sort of unpack.
Hmm.
And we want us to start shifting left. So less time here on create and deliver, more time on investigate and define.
Right. And even though, like the survey results showed, the majority of people were in Define, they were in the solution space. They were
Yeah.
probably building on data that, like in my case, got stale or not experimenting enough with the things that they're building.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that. So let's talk about how we're going to organize. If we agree that it's in the prep work, if we agree that the game is lost before we walk on the field, that the
Hmm.
launch is going to fall because we didn't do enough work beforehand in terms of understanding what it means to get our product adopted, then no amount of definition is going to help us here. And it
Right.
starts first with scope. All right. And I want to talk about scope a little differently here because a lot of us scope, and you have seen this, Roger, where scope
Hmm.
is defined by a shopping list of features.
Yep.
Where it comes, I remember walking into one place and I got two different spreadsheets. One had 70 things we had to get done in the next quarter, and the other one had like, 123. And it was just sort of like,
Hmm.
and I'm just looking at this thinking like, well, okay, hold on a second here. We
Right.
seem to be very busy being busy here, but we didn't. So one of the concepts I tried bringing in was what is what is the thing that we have the most appetite for right now?
Hmm.
Because we're going to get more done faster with higher quality by focusing on less.
Right.
And you're not going to get to that point if you just sit there and try to say, how many, you go to like, for example, there's these things called PI planning or the quarterly road mapping. And all it is people trying to stuff a Gantt chart full of features with a bunch of timelines and deadlines here. And my point being, stop doing that. Start asking of this, of the thing that we have the greatest appetite for, the thing the customer has the greatest appetite for. What can we do in a constrained time box to
Hmm.
deliver value on that? And notice that I didn't say get rid of time. I said use time as a constraint.
Right.
And then so the question stops becoming how long will it take to get done? but how much is this time worth, this particular bet? And it's a
Hmm.
different way of looking at things here. But I want to sit there and say, start looking at scope a little differently here. Because if all you're doing is stuffing a Gantt chart, I don't know, Roger, you've probably seen that as much as I have, and you probably
Oh,
experienced it
absolutely.
too.
Oh yeah, you're right though. That list of 70, okay, let's scope that out and figure out how many sprints it would take to get that list of 70 done
Yeah, and
instead of what's the most valuable thing we could spend our time on in this fixed time.
yeah, and it's a magical thinking because we never hit
Hmm.
those times. Things roll over, or worse, we get to the deadline, and all of a sudden we're cutting things. And so then again, yeah, again, it becomes a road to grief and misery here. The
Absolutely.
next thing is let's validate. Once we identify that thing we have the most appetite for, we need to keep it. And, perhaps maybe what happens is saying, well, we don't want to pick just one, we want to pick three. And we've had that. I've had that conversation. I said, and the first thing I say is, if you chase three rabbits, you catch none.
Hmm.
We get more done by focusing on less, and that less has more quality, and we get more feedback sooner here. So we want to identify that single riskiest assumption here, and we want to pressure test it. Again, we want to use time as a validation constraint to force decisions. Do we go ahead and pursue the idea? Do we need to pivot? Or do we need to punt it and move on to something that's a more beneficial opportunity here?
Right.
So again, we need to get into a habit and a culture of validation here. We need to validate the question. Does this product provide so much value, so much delight, so much differentiation that's hard to copy that customers are willing to take monies out of their budgets and put it into ours? Sort of a
Right.
cold reality there. But my point being is that, do the customers actually want this? And when I mean want this, do they want this enough to pay for it?
Hmm. Right.
Is this
So,
viable to us as a business opportunity and a part of our business model? I took over a product management at in a growth stage startup, and I found they had five different products in the product line. Only two of
mm,
them were able to sit there and actually run a business from. The other
mm.
three were leaking money because, first of all, it wasn't the business we were supposed to be in.
Oh,
I think
okay.
for example, they were building this mobile analytics that we're not competing with Pendo or Amplitude. We shouldn't be building this.
Hmm.
It's like if they want that sort of granular, if they want that sort of granular sort of analytics, there's all sorts of analytics tool. We are not in that business here.
Right.
So again, is this fit our business model? And is it feasible? Do we have what it takes to do this? Is it
Yeah.
something that we can do, that we can afford, that we have the culture, that we have the technical knowledge here? So again, we need to evaluate here.
Hmm. And on
And
that
then,
point, I just want to,
yeah,
folks are probably familiar with this slide of this is product market fit. If you haven't heard the term before, this is product market fit. And did a great job of explaining the three different elements. But we're taking a different take on it today. Want to make sure we're
yeah,
asking the right questions.
we hear so much of this and we see this slide. I thought, why don't we look at this from the lens of, valuation here? So
Hmm.
again, take a fresh look at something we see in here and go, huh. It's like, take a stop and think about that.
Right.
And then collaborate. All right. Your product management is not a solo sport. Okay.
No.
And for example, I teach my classes saying, when you're new to the organization, how quickly did you make friends with somebody in legal? How
Mm.
quickly did you find out who to talk to in finance? How quickly did you gain alliances in customer support? Because all these things are going to help you here. And the thing I like to say is, look, the first time they see you, you shouldn't be you hitting them up for a favor. They should already know your face, know who you
Right.
are. You've done that, and this is part of the discovery. You not only do this to make friends and influence people and have a network, but each one of these pieces of this puzzle is going to give you a different lens on what problem you're solving and for whom. What is
Hmm.
going to help drive adoption of our product here? Because I'll guarantee you, people in support are going to have a different idea than people in sales, and people in
Absolutely.
marketing might have a different idea than the people in data science. And we need to hear these different voices here. Plus,
Hmm.
by getting their feet under the table, you also get some adoption in terms of internally on how well
Yes.
people in the organization here. So it's really important that you do, more important than you may realize here. Don't skimp on this.
No. Crucial to hear many voices And as you said, start building a team of supporters that
Yeah,
want to work on this product together.
exactly. Which brings us to our second poll.
Hmm.
All righty. How often are product teams consciously testing for product market fit before building the product?
Hmm. Oh, good. There's some honest people out there. I love
Yeah, that's good to
it.
see.
Good to see a couple of people saying, admitting never. I love it. Thank you for being honest. And Dean, we got a question that I think actually is a good question to lead into the next section. So I'll read it now.
Okay.
We won't answer it yet. Let me say it that way, right? But there's this tension of, if you've launched and you're not embarrassed with your product, maybe you launched too late, right? If you
Yeah.
spend all the time polishing the whole thing, right? But how do you balance getting things out that do not have all the features your market needs to adopt, and yet still have
Right.
that discussion with the CFO, the product that, we're going to need to spend more time working on this
Yeah,
to make
I
sure
and
it
I think
sells.
because and I've heard this. This happens often when you're doing MVP or a first version. Someone from sales or someone upstream says, "No one's going to buy it if we don't put everything in."
Right. Right.
I
That's
reframe
always
that
their
saying,
response.
"Yeah," and my we've been there. My
Hmm.
response is, I think what I want to reframe that question. Not everybody is going to buy it
Right.
if we put everything in. But we do have a group of target customers from whom we think can be early adopters and
Hmm.
who can give us rapid feedback. So you need to change the scope from sell it to everybody to saying, let's find a focused set of customers. Remember, we talked about appetite on the scope. Well, your appetite is largely going to come from those early adopters, from those people who are willing to talk to you and give you time about where their pains, gains, and jobs to be done are.
Hmm.
Okay,
Absolutely.
we've had people. Let's end the poll. Let's share the results. Sometimes and rarely, first and second,
Hmm.
product market fit. Yeah. And a lot of
Yep.
this yeah, a lot of this has to do with how this works here. Okay, cool.
So good. We got another
Good poll.
question, and we're about to dive into it too. So, how do you validate your product idea before launching? Well, I'm glad
Wait,
you asked.
glad you asked. Because let's talk about how we execute now. Because, nothing's worse than a bunch of slides and not being able to execute on that. So let's talk about that.
Hmm.
First, let's frame what we're going to build as a hypothesis and not a mandate. In fact, the shops I ran, my last 3 or 4 shops, when I had epics in systems like Jira or ADO, I
Hmm.
demanded that those epics be shaped as hypotheses. Why? Because they have different components. First, they have an if then sort of component to it. If we give Karthik this particular set of capabilities, then he will be able to do the following.
Hmm.
Once we've stated it that way, now we can do a couple things. We can put metrics around, okay, what does success mean in terms of something tangible and actionable? And what are some of the unknowns and known are the risks that we probably need to think about as we want to execute on that solution there? So again, this helps us further shape and narrow down the focus of what that first thing is going to be. Yeah, you can see the difference here between the anatomy of a guess and the
Yes.
power of hypotheses here.
Right.
Um, Notice the term I use here, validate bets.
Hmm.
All right. I know some people like to talk about, hey, we're going to validate an investment here. Let's call it what it is. We are taking a certain amount of money, we're putting it into building the product and fielding the product and hoping it yields returns here.
Hmm.
Let's see. I
And
got
I
a
like the
question here.
word.
Oh, I like this. Oh, got a question from Tom here.
Hmm.
What if I'm not building a software product? Can I do this? You absolutely can do this. Now, the
Hmm.
time horizons are going to be a little longer, but I've seen companies do this with 3D printing. I've
Hmm.
seen companies do this now with some pretty sophisticated simulators and simulations. I've seen
Hmm.
companies do this with breadboarding. I've seen
Oh,
companies do this with just mock-up prototypes. So I
absolutely.
see this happening both in hardware as well as software. It's a really good question there, Tom.
Hmm. Yep.
Yeah, stop writing requirements. All they are is expensive guesses. Let's create some testable hypotheses. And you're saying, well, Dean, that sounds great, but how?
Mm.
Glad you asked. So, for those of you who may not be aware, we have the product side playbook. I don't know. In fact, Roger, you want to give us a
Yes.
quick on the product side playbook there, real quick, because
Oh,
I'm
absolutely.
excited to talk about it, but I realize like some of these people may not know what it is.
No, the Productside Playbook is a collection of over 20 templates that help you organize your thinking. And I want to be really clear about this. We are not about you must fill out this form in order to make process or make progress, right? It's about making sure you're thinking about the right things at the right time, asking the right questions, collaborating with the right people, and that helps you then prepare moving forward through that product side blueprint. So here, the solution hypothesis statement, and I'll turn it back over to you in a second, is about using a nice template that helps you, it asks the right questions and helps you formulate a hypothesis that then you can test. And I'll let you take it over from there.
Right, and so I call this a I call what's in our playbook a collaborative. It's collaborative canvases. The
Mm-hmm.
magic is not in the template. The magic is not in filling in the boxes, people. The
Right.
magic is in the conversations, the collaborations, the
Mm-hmm.
negotiations, the discovery that happens when you have this. And you'll notice in this, the first thing we ask is a very crisp and well-defined problem statement.
Mm-hmm.
All too often, people run in the room and say, let's build X and get it out the door. Again, that's hope as a strategy. And that doesn't really work. So, what is the underlying? For example, we talked about Karthik here, or we talked about, maybe Karthik is trying to match patient records to clinical trials.
Mm-hmm.
Karthik is probably going to be less concerned about what the technology is and how the solution is. Can he get his job done faster?
That's right.
Can he get his job done with less errors? Can he get his job done with better outcomes for his patients and customers? So, again, it's understanding the problem that underlies all of this. Then we have a solution. And again, a very crisp statement of that. Because if you can't articulate your problem and your summary very crisply, you're not going to be able to sit there and talk about the benefits. So, what are the benefits of what we're putting out the door?
Mm-hmm.
And you notice, like, for example, in the example we have here, where you talk about a person who's an HR specialist who are trying, get overwhelmed by repetitive manual processes here. So, the benefits of this product, of this problem, the solution to the problem, in this case, is time for strategic initiatives, improved employee engagement, more accurate data insights, operational efficiency, things that answers the question, what is in it for them?
Right.
This work has to occur well before you launch if you want adoption.
Well before you build.
Say that again. You
Right.
cannot, you cannot. If you skip on these steps, you are likely to have something that happened with some of these other products. Like I think Anki built a marvelous robot, technically
Mm-hmm.
sound, technically superior. Nobody wanted it.
Right.
Nobody wanted it. All right. It wasn't, it didn't answer the question, what's in it for me? And
That's
then
right.
we have the risks and assumptions. And it's not just internal risks as well. I mean, we have things internally that we need to think about. But what are the risks to the customer? What are the external factors that could impact us both? For example, some of us are working in AI. I would imagine that with here in the US, with 50 states, each of which are coming up with their own regulations that probably are going to show up sometime in late summer, that this is going to create quite an issue with many of us trying to get products out the door because these are external factors. And there are other external factors as well. We think about the energy it takes. You get some of these solutions out the door. We think about not just the regulations and not just the energy here. We think, do we have the right people to get this out the door? What happens when technologies shift? I've seen a lot of products that came out, I don't know, late last summer, and I'm looking at a whole slew of things like Claude and what do you call it, ChatGPT they're putting out, and they're putting people out of business, and that's sort of reminiscent. I think Roger, when you and I were working in SaaS software, where maybe
Oh
we sit
yeah.
up at night and saying, how is Amazon and their cloud services going to put us out of business tomorrow?
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yep.
so again, you need to think about the risks, not just of risks to you getting it out the door, risks that are internal here, but what are the risks to the customer? All right.
Right.
Last thing we want to do is get our customer into some sort of legal trouble, because if
That's
they
right.
get in legal trouble, we get in legal trouble.
That's right.
And so again, what's the impact on them? And then finally, we got the solution hypothesis statement in two parts here. The first half is for the solution, and this really answers the question, what is in it for the customer?
Mm-hmm.
And the
Yep.
second half answers the question, what's in it for us? Because if we don't build something to sustain our business, we're not going to be, we could even get to adoption, but it's not going to last very long because we can't afford to keep the product afloat.
Yeah. No,
Any
very
thoughts
good.
on this as you work with this Canvas before we move on?
No, I think you've covered it well. I want to get to the next one because it answers that earlier question, right? How do you validate your product idea
Right.
before launching? Here it is.
Now, notice I keep trying to talk about getting the focus smaller and
Mm-hmm.
smaller and smaller, which is why I use the word tiny, not small, not little, not scaled down, but I intentionally use the word tiny in the acts of discovery here.
Mm-hmm.
What is the least expensive test we can run to get us to the most brutal truth? Sort of gets in the question that Tom asked earlier there. And my responses were there are some very inexpensive ways to get these ideas. And I want to talk about this because this is part of our discovery and investigate we need to do before design because
Right.
it gets us to those brutal truths faster. We're seeing a lot of that talk with vibe coding of, hey, can I
Mm-hmm.
get out a quick prototype? Yes, we know it's not ready for production. It'll never be ready for production.
Right.
That's not the purpose of what we're vibe coding out here. What we're trying to do is get fast feedback to tell us whether the baby is ugly or not, to tell
Mm-hmm.
us if we need to pivot, punt, or pursue here. It kills off those zombie, what do you call it? Those zombie products that no one's ever going to want. They're basically dead on arrival. And again, it's testing assumptions and not opinions. So here's the point with that. Um, when you're getting pressure upstream and they have opinions, you don't
Right.
want to sit there and just sit there and play, as William Ury says, you don't want to play the no game. You want to get to what they call the positive no and say, I
Mm-hmm.
get what you're saying here. Let me frame this with some assumptions and let's go ahead and pressure test this. And so when you come back, it's not whether their opinion was good or bad. You're not attacking their opinion. You're giving them data for a decision.
Right.
And there's all sorts of little ways to do this. Landing pages. Now, these are a lot for software here. I think I already mentioned some for hardware.
Mm-hmm.
But landing pages, Wizard of Oz, what do you call it? Fake door tests, vibe coded prototypes, synthetic data. We did that with a patient record system that I was working on. We couldn't use real patient records, but we could synthesize them. So there's different ways. I think the painted door, we see our fake door test, we see a lot. It's that little button that sits on your screen and saying, hey, would you like to use this feature or would you like to do this analysis? And you click on it and it says, we haven't built it yet, but would you like to be notified when? Would you like to be an early consumer
Right.
of it? Would you like, yeah, they usually use some sort of term like, would you like to be an early adopter? Would you like to
Mm-hmm.
be one of the first? Because everyone wants to be first on the list there. And it uses some language like that. And what's happening is they're actually getting signals from within the working product. I think Zoom did this last year. They had a little
Mm-hmm.
button dead center in that control bar saying use AI to interpret the,
Oh
what do you
yeah.
call it, the analyze it. I click on it,
Mm-hmm.
and sure enough, it's saying it's not built yet, but if you're interested,
Right.
you know, and
Mm-hmm.
and so again, there's tests like that you can run both in the wild or not there.
Yeah. So let me break in on a question that Stephen asked. He appreciates this talk about launching a product and features, but what's the difference in approach when you want to be talking about existing iterations, existing capability instead of like a complete net new, right? We all want to work on shiny new things, but the reality is we often get hundreds of enhancement requests on existing functionality. And I think this
Well,
slide helps with that.
yeah, because these are things you can do with an existing product. These are things I did when I was over at companies like Aprimo. That
Right.
product was 15 years old. We had a known customer base. We had, everyone had at least five different features or opinions here.
Hmm.
And but let's face it, we all live in a world of limited resources and unlimited
Right.
opportunities.
Yep.
So, how do we sit there? And there are some ways of doing this. For example, um, Watson Oncology. was a good example here. They didn't collect any analytics that showed them
Mm,
that it wasn't getting adopted, or at least if they did, they were ignoring them. So there are
right.
things you can do with existing products. In fact, here's the problem. I showed you that blueprint, and don't think of that as sequential. You should
Hmm.
always be practicing continuous discovery. Now,
Right.
your method of continuous discovery is going to change.
Hmm.
Whether you're the if the product hasn't been launched versus if the product launched, if and depending on whether the product's in a growth state, it's in a mature state, or if
Right.
it's sort of getting closer to end of
Um,
life. But you
yeah.
should always be engaging in tiny acts of discovery and getting that feedback. And you
Right.
might wonder, Dean, how do I do that?
Right. Well,
Well,
let me answer round out a little bit more on Stephen's question. So, Stephen, if you're
yeah,
trying to evaluate the value of a whole bunch of different feature requests, do some tiny acts of value discovery just to test what sticks more with people. And you can do that with things like landing pages or explainer videos. If you're trying to evaluate, well, which way should we go on a particular enhancement, then something like an A/B test might be a
yeah.
valuable approach for you to take. And the next slide now shows a template for helping you organize these kind of tests.
Right. And so it starts out, I mean, again, this is a conversational piece. It is a worksheet. First question
Mhm.
you and others may want to ask is, well, what do we know? What do we know about our persona? What do we know about the system? What do we know about what is our current state of mind? And what don't we know? This is actually works out very well with existing products here. All right. I mean, think about it. What do we, and I really almost want to change this to what do we assume?
Right.
Think
Yep.
about it. Well, maybe
Mhm.
if, like I said, it's like what are we assuming that we know,
Right.
and what and I mean, think about all these features. I get these. I'm assuming that there's value to them. All
Hmm.
right, all right. Well, I really don't know or not. So again, with these different ones, so now you can sit there and start forming your hypotheses here. So, for example, what don't you know? This might be what you don't know about these various features here. The
Hmm.
nice thing is you can prioritize them then based
Right.
off of how much impact you think they're going to have versus how uncertain you are.
Right.
Because, for example, if I've got my first unknown or ambiguous assumption is high impact and high uncertainty, I probably want to unpack that first because that has the greatest risk to adoption and delivery and adoption here. If I have something down here that's low impact and low uncertainty, I can probably move forward
Right.
even without doing a whole lot of discovery. But all too often we operate down here.
Hmm.
Okay, and sort of in this middle line, we're sort of
Yeah.
hey, the product's been out there. We're sort of assuming it. Yeah, that doesn't work out well. Now you form your hypotheses, and then notice the tiny acts of discovery.
Hmm.
These are the things, and think about it. These aren't just getting the data scientist to run,
Right.
maybe something on your day from your data lake here, but maybe this is a survey. Maybe this is user feedback. I remember my first stop had to be with someone in legals, and walking down
Mm.
to someone and say, Abe, if we do this, am I going to Club Fed? All
Right.
right,
Yep.
and because we were kept hearing like, well, you can't do this with patient records, you can't do this, whatever, and we all had all this legal advice. And I said, you know what? I'm tired of all this legal advice. It was a half-hour meeting. It lasted only 10, 15 minutes because we had all our ducks in a row, and basically it was like, are you doing this? No. Are you doing this? Yes. Are you certified this? Yes. Okay, well, keep doing this and don't deviate from the plan then. Sounds like you got it together. We got that feedback. So again, it's these things that different people on the team can do in a 1 or 2 day time frame. Again, using
Hmm.
time as a constraint.
Right. We got a question actually, Dean. Can you share an example of turning a requirement into a hypothesis?
If you got an example, so I think we have all sorts of examples there. I think one we had, I don't know, Roger, I'm trying to think of one right off the top of my head here. I think one that I had was I think people were looking for a particular, this came with reports.
Mm.
So I think people had a lot of these things. We have requirements for all this customization on these reports.
Right.
And this was back when I was working with a system that we moved from on-prem to SaaS. And part of that process requires some feature hostage negotiations where you've got to say no to some things that have been around. So I started asking people, like, all right, you have this requirement for this report and all these things here. Who's using this report and what
Right.
decisions are they making?
Hmm.
They couldn't they couldn't come up with that. And I said,
Mm.
you understand this report's been out for 10 years. It is quite feasible. Well, you're familiar with local politics. It's like
Oh yeah.
what I call these laws. You see these arcane laws, like in North Carolina,
Hmm.
you can't whistle while you're eating ice cream or something stupid like that. And you get some of
Right.
these requirements that were very suited to purpose, and then time has passed and they've outlived that. So I think
Right.
part of that then is doing the hypothesis thing. If we do this report, then the following people will be able to make the following decisions,
Right.
take the following actions, be in compliance with whatever. So now what I've done is I've taken this where someone's saying, I have to have this report. The customers had this report. We've always run this report. And it could be that they still have to.
Hmm.
But when I
Yeah, it
started
might be a
asking questions, well,
regulation.
what's that?
Yeah. It might be a
Yeah,
regulation, but
it might
then
be.
how is it delivering real value?
But again, I had to ask the question, who's getting it? What decisions and actions are they taking?
Right.
Nobody in the room can answer that question. And I said, well, before we do this, let's
Hmm.
understand. Again, let's make it. Now, it turned out that they actually needed it. And that was great. But nobody
Right.
had that learning there. So then we were able to take the requirement. By the way, we didn't have to build it as robust as the old
Ah,
system.
very
We
good.
were actually able to save time, save money, and create a better user experience by shaving it down because laws had changed, requirements had changed, users had changed. So by
Right.
going back and doing that discovery, not only did we take that requirement and make it a what do you call it? Make it a hypothesis. We realized we didn't have to do as much.
Right. That's awesome. Great example.
Yeah. Now, what are you going to measure? I understand that when we do analytics, that's sort of a lagging indicator, but it can also be a leading indicator in terms of you need to think about before I put this product out or this new feature in this existing system out, what am I going to measure?
Hmm.
You need to think about that. I mean, I've seen people, I've been in 4 shops where an analytics product like Pendo came in the door and everyone created a dashboard and it was just, widgets everywhere and no meaning anywhere.
Right.
Eh, you've seen that too, right?
Oh
I
yes.
mean, yeah, the first time someone starts working with the Power BI, widget here, report,
Hmm.
and so you need to take a step back, and this gets into our hypothesis. What are we measuring that
Right.
helps us understand if we are keeping our promises to the customer?
Hmm.
Those are success metrics.
Yep.
Are we creating value for them? Are they growing with it? What are their first impressions? Is it tied to their value? Is it focused on their outcomes? What's in it for them? Then we have health metrics. Is our product or our process or our people getting in the way of success?
Right.
And
Or
that could be something technical like uptime and system stability. It could be user experience. It could be reliability. It could be that we have crappy customer support.
yeah.
It could be that we have horrible onboarding. It could
Hmm.
be that activation is Byzantine. So again, you need to keep an eye on that. And sure enough, here's a nice conversational canvas here where you can start thinking about your product readiness plan here.
Right.
Who's going to be those customers who we're going to be measuring against here? What do we know about them and their needs?
Mhm.
How many customers? How long will the test? How long will the test run? I can't. I've
Mhm.
seen so many places where they're like they run an A/B test and it runs there. All right. Test teams' roles and responsibilities. So again, it's, who's going to, what's the goal or objective? What is the metric? And what is the target of success? We want to
Yes.
see a 30% increase. We want to
Absolutely.
see 99.95 uptime here.
Hmm. Yep. These are great.
And then there's go to market. Again, you need to start working on this earlier. If
Hmm.
you've got friends in product marketing, find an ally to work with you earlier. We did that over at IQVIA, and it helped our team immeasurably.
Great.
And that way we could develop the plan together, drive internal awareness, get buy-in
Hmm.
from internal stakeholders, get them to partner on that awareness, get them to become evangelists on our behalf, drive customer awareness, and then after we're out the door, make sure we're generating attention and measuring if we're capturing adoption. And again, another canvas for this, the problem statement, our target audience. We've already talked about these. But again, what is the persona? What are the promises we are making? And what are the proof points that we're going to prove that with? Again, nothing magical about these canvases here. You can look at them later. You can walk through them in when you get the if you get the playbook here. But I want you just to be aware that doing this up front is going to help you in that success. So just to give you one big wrap up here, launch is not a campaign. We want to test our hypotheses. We want to define what good looks like, what success looks like for both us and the customer.
Right.
We want to do that through tiny acts of discovery and frequent validation, continuous discovery.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Starting today, what will you do differently?
Mm-hmm. Let's hear from you all, what you've hopefully learned.
Poll,
What
so
you're
get
trying
some
to
poll
do.
feedback here.
Yeah. Tiny acts of discovery out to an early lead.
Got an interesting conversation I want to dive into, but I don't think we're going to have time for it.
Right. Now we have a number of questions actually. So I'll go through the next couple of slides quickly, and then we'll have a little bit of time for Q&A at the end.
Cool. Love the questions.
Mm-hmm.
May need to answer them afterwards too.
Right.
And not using ChatGPT. Alrighty, we're getting responses. We're getting responses. I'll give about another few seconds here. This is really interesting.
Hmm.
All right, I'm going to end the poll here. I'm going to share the results.
Mm-hmm.
Really interesting. Shape, yeah. You cannot go wrong with shape, narrowing down the focus on appetite and using time as that constraint. And de-risking, yeah, if you're going to take two things away, yeah, these would be in the top two on my list as well.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's an existing product or a what do you call it, a new product.
Okay.
Hey, you want to talk about this really quick?
All right, yeah. So a couple quick things, just so you all are aware. If you want to learn more about how discovery is both an important capability and oftentimes the weakest one, you can download our product management maturity report. We published it last month. Check it out. It is a great report. Um, the report was actually built up, go back just one. The report was actually built up by taking team assessments. So you can take a free team assessment. If you're a leader in a product management, you can take that free team assessment and you'll be able to compare yourself to those results and see how is your team doing, right? Is your team shifting left, as we talked about, or is it spending way too much time on the creation aspects of that, right? Look at our product side playbooks. We already talked about those. Those are also available on our website, right? So check it out. Okay.
I think,
And like I said, download that report.
yeah, I think Kim's going to share a link in the chat as well to that report.
Right. Yep.
Yep. There it is.
There it is. Awesome. Let's keep going.
Hey, upcoming webinars.
Yeah. So we're going to launch a whole new series next month called the PM Tension Series. And it's the tension between inside and outside of product teams, right? Of things like authority without accountability, or speed versus understanding, or process versus progress. In the first part of that series, we'll talk about the tension between what am I supposed to be doing as a product management person and what am I really doing? And how do
Yeah.
you try to get that focus, right? We
And
also will have another part of that.
yeah, I think we got part two of that where it's like how
Mhm.
smart teams sometimes put out stupid products.
Absolutely, right? And there's more information in the chat, but let's keep going so we have time for questions.
Right? Oh,
All right,
training.
courses coming up. Yes, we have more training coming. Dean will be kicking off in March our OPM core class, our flagship course, also some product management courses. And hey, if you want to be actually in person, Tom Evans will be in London teaching our OPM course. So very important if you liked in-person training versus online, but lots of dates coming up. Check them out and use the links that we have in the chat.
It's time for Q&A. Let me
All right,
stop
so
sharing my
stop.
screen.
Yes, excellent. All right, lots of questions. Let's see how many we can get through here. Okay, user feedback can be so misleading sometimes. I love the fake button idea for a test, but what could, in just a minute, what could be some other such tests that help validate accurately what users are really thinking about?
Right. And I think, like I said, there's things with analytics that we can do. So we can do quite a bit. In fact, I would look at companies like Split.io or Launch Darkly who specialize in things like using feature toggling as a means of testing things out with different cohorts of people. Not only with just A/B reports, but testing for other things. You could be running a very focused beta with just a small group with analytics instrumentation. We did that all the time at IQVIA, where we had feature toggles and we said, only for this customer and these 6 users, we're going to see what they're doing, how they actually do things over the next week. And then we're going to come back
Right.
with their manager who thought she knew how her people worked and then was very shocked by
Hmm.
the analytics and said, like, oh, okay, I can see why we're going to be deprioritizing other things.
Right.
So,
Absolutely.
so again, there's lots of experts out there on that. We'll be doing a blog post on this, so I'll make sure we mention some of those companies that really are helpful on learning how to test. And I think Teresa Torres has a really good book on discovery that everyone should have read by now.
Absolutely. Great answer. Okay, physical products. What are some ideas to validate price other than online surveys? The best time, the best test is the credit card test. Yes, you can do, one of those ones where you say sign up for the prototype and this is how much it's going to cost, and
Yeah.
you'll learn later, a Kickstarter kind of thing. But
Yeah.
there are other things as well.
Well, there's a lot of elements there because you got to think about varying needs for channel partners. I mean, if let's say you're putting
Mm,
together something like a jet engine, there's a lot of moving parts and a lot of partners there,
literally.
and or versus I was remember working with somebody. They did drone. What do you call it? They created drones for agriculture. They flew over these
Mhm.
farm fields here, and again, the cost of products. They figured they had thought they had that pricing down, and they hadn't realized what happens when chip prices go up. So I think
Right.
that's going to take. You can again just think about the parts that make up the whole here. In other words, you have to know how much it costs per unit for you
Mhm.
to just break even. And
Absolutely.
then what you probably need to do is engage in what they call value-based pricing conversations. All right,
Mhm.
instead of just saying I'm going to put a 10% margin, a margin on top of that price, we're going to go ahead and see what the market's going to bear for this. And so that's usually done through a series of surveys and conversations as well.
Right. And I'm putting it in the chat, but Rocky, have a look at conjoint analysis. It's a
Conjoint
technique that
analysis is
actually
good there.
helps
Van
you
Westendorp is another.
exactly establishing real value. All right. I think we have time. Next question. How do we do product readiness testing for an existing product?
Well, and I think we've had that conversation all along here. It's going to be different tests. For example, you can run an A/B test on a live product here if
Mhm.
you've got the right instrumentation. You can do a painted door test. I did one test where it was just sort of a pop up, one of those little pop up, in app windows that said, "Would you like to speak to the product manager responsible
Mm,
for these search results?"
right.
And because I knew people were unhappy about it, and I was new at the company, and this was a way for me to actually get in front of customers and talk to them directly. So it depends on how well you want to do this testing here. You can always look at the data. You can always talk to the customers. There's all sorts of instrumentation to do that. You could even just send out wireframes or vibe
Right.
code something and get early adopts saying, hey, use this and give me feedback on it. With AI, it's getting easier and easier to do this as well. We teach that in our AI class as well.
Hmm.
So again, I think it really is limited to where your product is in its life cycle. If it's existing, is it a growth state? Is it maturity? Is it getting sort of towards end of life? Because
Right.
it is going to change how you test and how you frame those
Absolutely.
tests.
Right. All right. Let's take one more. And this one's more of a general understanding of context, right? Across multiple products, how do you stay ahead of emerging technology and industry shifts? Are there specific channels or signals you follow outside of structured research,
So
especially for identifying and small changes and users don't ask, but
yeah, we
for end up improving their day to day?
right. We should have monitors out on the market. But one of the things that I established with my teams was I want you to have about 60 to 65% of your capacity on building. I want another 10% of your capacity on running tiny acts of discovery, where
Mm,
you meet on Monday, you figure what 2 or 3 things that we need to run tests. So the test can start on Monday. It has to be done by Friday morning. And how do we discuss moving forward there? So part of this is engaging in things like dual track agile, or making sure that you have a some sort of culture of continuous discovery there. And you might even have to make friends with your DevOps peeps. That's not a bad thing.
right. And the last thing I'll say there is get help from your AI assistant, right?
Yeah.
Set up an agent, give it the particular places your customers frequent, the things that they ask, the forums that they use, and have it start monitoring for you automatically and giving you insights on what's being
Yeah.
said out there.
Yeah. And you've got other people on your team with different talents. I had data
Mhm.
scientists looking at data all the time. I had, people on my engineering team looking at different technology all the time. But we kept these tests very tiny and very
Mhm.
focused, as opposed to being this blank check that these spikes become when we're working.
Absolutely. Well, thank you all for joining us. And we really loved all the questions and the lively conversation. We hope you are able to experiment more, experiment earlier, shift left so that you can earn that adoption when you ship great products.
All right. Thank you all.
All right. Take care. Have a good week.